Alright, so a lot of you have, or not a lot, but a couple of you have requested that I make a video kind of discussing some of my specific build, um, I guess my specific build in general, and that doesn't make any sense, but sorry, I'm going to totally go off script here and just kind of wing this. But anyway, I was just going to make this video to give some general build advice as well as kind of talk about my build specifically, what I use, what I've reforged for effects, and what you might want to do if you're doing a PvE based build or maybe even a PvP based build. So I don't have too much experience with a PvP based build. I've dabbled in it a bit. To be honest, I'm not totally a fan of it. So even though I come from Dark Souls, I really enjoy the PvP there. But I do know some of the skills that tend to work there, so I'll kind of brush up on those a bit. Um, but there's going to be a lot of topics that I'm going to cover because there's a lot that goes into making builds in Nioh. So without further ado, let's just kind of jump into it. I did write down a couple of the topics that I think that I should cover, but again, I'm not going with any script here. But the first thing to, I guess, to consider are, your weapon and armor sets, basically. So obviously these are going to cater to your playstyle as well as what techniques you prefer to use, what weapons you prefer to use. So I mean, if you like, in my case, I wanted to use dual swords and single sword. Kind of wanted to go with a tri-sword build. So with the dual swords, I really liked Sign of the Cross. So I went with the Master Swordsman set because that's something that's going to give me Sign of the Cross damage, and obviously it's dual sword related. The other component to choosing armor sets is obviously going to be the weight component, because you have to consider the agility that you want to be at, whether you want to stay at A or B. Nobody really goes to C, but you could totally do that. But the important distinction is between A and B, because there's just some sets that, even with a large investment into stamina, you're still going to struggle to maintain a B agility. So, like for instance, the set that I'm using right now, if I were to invest 99 in stamina, I'm not even sure if I would hit A agility ever. So you have to kind of consider, what are you willing to, like, what's the weight that you're willing to go to, what agility must you have. In my opinion, I would suggest to at least try out agility B. I stuck with agility A for a long time when I started, because that's kind of what I do with Dark Souls. I was, would go with a low weight class so that I could improve my rolling and stamina consumption and whatnot. And so a lot of those components kind of carry over onto here, but it's really not bad. A B agility, I've gotten quite used to it. Works perfectly fine. I don't think my defensive techniques have really suffered from it. Anyway, so once you've kind of determined that, what you want to use, you kind of just plan it out from there. The weapon and armor sets that you're going to use, mix it up, figure out the weight that you need, or the weight that you're going to have with those. Keep in mind that obviously the heavier pieces, if you're trying to min-max or you're trying to hit a certain weight threshold like 30.1, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The head piece, the gloves, and the boots are generally going to be the lightest. In the case of the Master Swordsman set, the headpiece I think is actually is like a tenth of a unit higher than the legs and the boots. So keep that in mind. That's kind of what I did here. As you can see, I went with the gloves and the boots for the Master Swordsman set because the Kingo set was at like a moderate weight, so I didn't need to, because I was going for a 30.1 weight threshold, so I didn't need to put on a heavier piece for the chest or the torso in order to hit that weight. As you can see, I'm at 31.1 right now. So you figure that out, get your weapons, you know what sets you're going to go with, you know what weight you're going to try to obtain, your agility, and you want to consider your stat allocation. And this is, where is it? There it is. This all depends on whether you're just going to max out. I actually haven't even, since the previous patch, can't remember if 400 is the highest or not. But whether you're going to min-max your character or you're just going to be kind of like a jack of all trades and just pump all of your stats as high as they can go. I don't do that. Again, coming from Dark Souls, I've always been in the min-max mindset, and that's kind of fun for me. So, despite that, I'm like level 230, so it's not really min-maxed. But as you can see, the emphasis for a tri-sword build being dual swords and single sword, I have my heart maxed out as well as my skill. And then for every other stat, I just hit the bare minimum so that I can use the effects of whatever, you know, like the magic is at 9, so I can use the Yasukani, and then body, strength, those are at 6, so I can use the crafted armor sets that, you know, I'm sure you know that when you craft your armor sets, it actually decreases the stat requirement to use them by half, I believe, something like that. And then Spirit is at 18, and that's just so I can hit the amount of effects that I want for Karajishi. I don't really care for the last effect, which unlocks at 21, I believe, so I just stop at 18 there. So again, that's just kind of how I broke down my stats. Stamina is at 31, that's just enough for me to hit B agility. As you can see down below at my equipment weight, I'm at 69.8% with a B agility. So that's what I went for. So I kind of pre-calculated this out, and then even went through and used some books of reincarnation to just kind of play around with the stats a bit. But yeah, so when it comes to this, obviously there is a consideration for min-maxing, which I do. And then hitting the equipment mins for your build, making sure that you hit the proper stamina for the agility class that you want. And then there's also the consideration of skill points as well as, you know, key management in general. Obviously, you know if you're using a katana build, a lot of some of my older videos, people mention that I have a ton of key, and that's because, you know, the katana uses the heart as the primary stat for damage, and so I just pumped that, and, you know, it obviously ended up giving me a lot of key with that. And so, but if you're using you know, a spear build or something like that that doesn't use heart as a primary stat, you still want to consider investing into heart so that you have a decent key pool to pull from, you know, because it's going to be important for obviously everything in terms of offense as well as defense, you know, keeping you out of the key depletion state and whatnot. So, and then the other component to consider are skill points, you know, how many active and passive skills that you need to unlock. And so obviously I think, yeah, skill and strength are going to give you 1 point per increase in stat, whereas things like heart, body, and stamina are like every other point. So things like, you know, your axe build, your spear builds, those are going to be a little bit harder for you to kind of pull those points. So it's easier for your people that use those builds to focus almost primarily on their weapon, and then just pull you know, skill points from the various stats so that they have, you know, either extra key or even key pulse, which you're going to gain far more from skill, but you do gain some from strength as well. So obviously key pulse is very important. So again, with a dual sword build, you're going to maximize skill anyway, so key pulse is not an issue for this particular build either. So those are the main, obviously damage, of course, you know, if you're using spear, you're going to want to emphasize body. But so those are the main considerations for your stat allocation. Then moving into, I guess, something a little more insignificant would be the titles. Basically, a lot of the titles that you receive are going to give you some amount of points for your reputation level, and you get the prestige points or whatever, however this is supposed to be worded. But this is obviously purely based on your gameplay style. You know, whether you want to, emphasize gold or Amrita or whatever. Obviously, you can see in my breakdown there, I pretty much exclusively went with anything that was applicable to damage or just combat related. So I just went with close combat damage, key, the elixir effect on recovery, toughness, ninjutsu, and then this one, basically the same thing. I just disregarded things like luck and living weapons, because I don't really use living weapon or Amrita, etc. But those are definitely something that you could totally invest in. I mean, this, as you can see, is not really much of a percent change, 10%-ish, depending on how many titles you've received. I could totally see people going for luck though, because the higher luck you have, the better chance you're going to get a better equipment. And obviously for living weapon based builds, the Amrita earned is going to be pretty important as well. So stuff like that. So again, just whatever caters to your play style. I don't think it's that significant. I do think that people should invest in toughness here, especially if you're going to go with an A agility build, because if you want to hit the 200 breakpoint, where you see a lot of the revenants are just like eating hits while they're dishing out a lot of damage. This toughness that you can acquire from the prestige points are going to really supplement your A agility build, so that you hit that breakpoint without having to eliminate one of your armor pieces for a heavier set, so that you can kind of hit that toughness breakpoint. So that's all that really needs to be said there. I mean, most of that is pretty self-explanatory. So the big thing that I think we can go over here are going to be the types of effects that you're going to reforge on your weapons. So there's tons of options you can go for. Just kind of, I'll talk a little bit about both of the weapons that I have here and why I went for them. But some of the considerations that I had for the weapon effects would be, maximizing your damage, managing your key, whether you want to go for some sort of elemental based damage, then the effects that you roll on your ranged weapons, and obviously the consideration for PvP or PvE. So most of mine are PvE oriented. I initially started my build with a PvP in mind, but that was before PvP came out. But let's just kind of go through these and talk about these. So initially here I rolled a skill break, which for the dual swords I thought was pretty beneficial. I played around with skill break, key, general key damage, as well as some of the other effects. And I ended up going with skill break because the dual swords does a pretty good job at breaking through defenses. So most of the attacks that you use with the dual swords are going to be skills. So having the ability to really put your opponent, mainly a human opponent, on edge near their key depletion state was pretty important for me, to either put them in a state where I can finish them off with a sign of the cross, a couple of them if they end up on the ground, or even just do a grapple if I wanted to. That's the main reason for the skill break. Then close combat damage, this caps off at 20%. A lot of people with dual swords would go with skill damage. However, it's very odd, but rolling a high skill damage, I think the highest is supposed to be like 17.9, but I've never seen it before. The highest I've seen is 16.9. But that's not going to affect your other the general damage that you do with the weak and strong attacks, just your skills. So, I mean, for 1 to 2% difference and a headache to roll, I really do not see the reason to go with skill damage over close combat. I don't think you're going to notice much of a difference, but it's totally up to you. If you manage to roll that, go with it. I think close combat damage is one of the staples for most weapons. I don't see anything else that besides skill damage that you would want to replace that with. Final blow damage, totally based on your build. If your build puts your opponent at a hard knockdown state a lot, like the sword and the dual swords, I would recommend going for it. That's you'll see a lot of my videos of doing a ton of damage to bosses just off of final blows. A lot of the humanoid bosses, obviously, like upwards towards like 30, 35, 40,000 damage. And that's a lot of it is due to the Kingo set that I'm using, as well as the final blow damage that I'm getting from these, from both of these weapons. So definitely recommend final blow damage if your build is going to kind of center around it. I use backwave a lot, that you'll notice in my videos, so it's super important for me to have final blow damage. Obviously, keep in mind that the special effects that you have for your melee weapons don't carry over to each melee weapon. They're obviously specific to that. But in the case of the ranged weapon, we'll get into that in a bit, but there are some from the ranged weapons that actually carry over, and that's going to also push your damage a bit further. So here I save scummed a lot to roll this Sign of the Cross star damage after the recent patch. Again, I use Sign of the Cross a lot, so to be able to increase the damage without using the skill damage effect, that was pretty important for me, especially since I use it a lot. It does a ton of damage, which is really nice. It's really the only reason for that. Depending on some of your whatever other weapons you're using, like spear, spear fall would be a great one. That's a really good skill to emphasize if you can find one, or even craft a weapon that has star damage for something like spear fall, or I think some of the other weapons like people are using, like the lumber chop or whatever. But those they range in whatever value you can roll. And on Reddit there is a user, his name is like SLJM something, I can't remember, but he's with the help of a few other people, has created like this weapon and armor and ranged reforge table where you can look at a lot of these different effects that are possible to roll on your weapon, and it shows like the ranges, the stat ranges, so you can kind of get an idea of what percentage you want to go for. In my opinion, I played a lot of Bloodborne, and I was not a fan of just save scumming for the gems, and that which made me go crazy for just a small percentage difference. So do yourself a favor and do not go for the highest percentage possible. Just find something that's within an acceptable range for you, so that you don't pull your hair out. But that's what I would do. I got lucky with a lot of these rolls, though. So, hey, Angie, thanks for coming. So the next effect I have on here is familiarity damage bonus. This was recently added to the patch where it actually stacks with close combat damage. It used to be something where you would have one or the other, but now that they stack, it's super important that you have both of them. This is going to push your damage a lot. You obviously want to find, I would say shoot for A-. It's super easy to roll familiarity damage bonus. Shoot for A- when at 0 familiarity, and then it should go to A when you're at max. That's going to be a good portion. And then obviously my set bonus there, and then I have changed to attack skill. So obviously whatever weapon you're using, if it's a spear, shoot for CTA body. If it's a sword, CTA heart. Dual sword, CTA skill, you get the idea. Unless for some reason you're using a spear build, but you're also using a katana, so you just pushed heart a lot, then in that case, if you had your spear, I'd probably say use CTA heart. Whatever your highest skill or stat point is, I would shoot for that particular stat. There is a star-based skill where you can get something like double A- or whatever for CTA. Super annoying to get. I tried to get it a few times, but ended up rolling different effects. Or like I would roll heart on my dual swords and whatnot. Oh, thank you. But so yeah, so there is a subreddit called r/Shinju, SHINJU, and this is where people do a lot of revenant trading. So if there's something that you're looking for, like a CTA skill inheritable, just go on there and say, hey, looking for this, CTA skill inheritable. Does anybody have one that they can share? And then you guys will collaborate and find a spot that you can drop the weapon and pick it up. And I have some, so if I think I still have a CTA skill A minus. So if anybody wants one of those, we can coordinate and I can drop you one. Nice. So yeah, that's my dual swords. Right now, I got super lucky with that 205. I was playing one of the Way of the Demon missions, and on like the DLC area, and a 205 weapon dropped. So I ended up soul matching it onto this weapon, and obviously it's plus 20. So pretty high here. We'll move on to the sword that I'm using. I'm using the Tagi Sadamune because I want to get the bonus from the Kingo set. Yeah, they really are rare. Apparently they go as high as 210, but I just haven't seen. I just haven't seen it. I've been farming those missions for a long time, and highest I ever saw was that 205, and it was just that one. So I imagine by the next DLC they're gonna push it again. So we'll see. But you'll see here on my Atagi Sanamune that I'm using a lot of the same effects from the dual sword. I got the familiarity damage bonus, the CTA heart, the close combat damage, and the final blow damage. I got that drop, the 205 drop on, I think it was Bovine Demon, something like that. It was in the DLC area. It's like the mission where you fight in that shrine, like where you do all the Omio dojo missions. You fight in that shrine and you're just fighting waves of enemies. But I believe it's called Bovine Demon. So the main difference with this, no problem. The main difference with this weapon is that I have the weakened armor for torso, and when it comes to weaken effects, if you're going to go with weakened armor, go with torso. Torso is obviously the strongest armor piece that any humanoid enemy is going to have, so it's going to weaken them the most. They have a lot of defense on the chest pieces, so weakening the chest piece is going to be the most beneficial that you could do, as opposed to the head or the boots or whatever. The alternative to that would be more of the offensive component, because you could weaken it and then do damage. But the defensive component would be the weakened melee weapons. That one's also quite effective, but that basically would mean that your opponent's going to be hitting you with a noodle. It's just going to weaken it to a great extent. But if you're in a PvP scenario, if that's your thing, and you get hit with that sort of effect, you'd probably just play defense until it goes away. So that's why I'm not a big fan of it. So I prefer weakened armor torso. I'm more of an offensive player anyway, and it also works really well in PvE, especially when you're using something like backwave, which I use a lot with my sword. It will actually trigger from the backwave, so I can hit him with the final blow, which is after the weakened armor torso, and it does a good amount of damage. So that's what I would recommend, but it's totally up to you. When it comes to element attributes, you can put one on your weapon. This one obviously comes with one, but for the most part, the element, you're going to get a better scaling and damage from the element if you just invest in the Omio elements. So I use a water-based one, just because, again, I like to decrease defenses so that I get more damage out. But for the most part, I see a lot of the newer players might try to put on that fire damage for your specific weapon at like 50% or something like that, which is actually, from what I believe, more applicable when you're using like a living weapon sort of build, and not so much going to increase your damage from just a general melee standpoint. So I would not recommend using those types of effects. You could check on Reddit. A lot of people have experimented with it, but that's kind of what I gathered from it. So I would avoid those. Let's see, what else? Then we have the ranged weapons. So this is what I was talking about. With these ranged weapons here, there is two stats that you want to consider, and this depends on your agility. So if you wanted to go for that 30.1 weight breakpoint, I would highly recommend that you roll equipment weight damage bonus on your ranged weapons, because that's actually going to affect your melee. So it will actually give you a bonus to it. But if you're at an A agility, then you want to roll agility damage bonus instead, because you're not going to be at a 30.1 breakpoint. So you won't be able to maximize the damage bonus from the equipment weight. So that's two things that you want to consider, you know, where you're at in terms of agility and which one you want to roll for your ranged weapons. But definitely roll one of those, because it's going to give you a boost in your damage. I read somewhere that the fire damage from the cannon increases melee damage. I honestly haven't seen that, so but I mean, I haven't experienced it at all. But you know, if you're particular about it and you want to give it a shot, try rolling that on your cannon. The rest of them, I don't really use ranged weapons a lot. I use the bow more than anything, but bow is super good in PvP. Actually kind of broken. But I didn't really care for some of these rolls. I just kind of went with them because I liked them. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, agility on your bow is... I used to have agility on both of my ranged weapons, and then after the patch, I switched to equipment weight just because I was pretty heavy. And then you can see a lot. I've rolled a lot. The same here with my Yoichi's bow. The two effects that I probably should have went over with PvP, if that's what you're building for. When it comes to PvP, there's two particular roles: Pierce Guard and Parry Disabled. Those two are actually really effective in PvP, because you can keep up a hyper aggressive offense, and even though your opponent might be blocking, they're still taking a ton of damage. I've fought several people that have these types of builds, and I literally have no answer. Yeah, the auto track is actually really cool. If you're locked on, it will automatically track the opponent, so you don't have to worry about hitting them too much. And again, auto track actually works really well in PvP. There are people that are using bows where they have Pierce Guard, auto track, and then their movement speeds up, and it's an insane amount of damage. And they're even stacking things like key damage on there, so when you get hit, you're losing a ton of health and a ton of key, to the point where you're near a key depletion state, and you're just trying to hide from arrows the whole time. It's pretty insane. They're really strong in PvP, which is funny because for the most part, bows aren't that good in other games like Dark Souls and whatnot. So, but yeah. So you see here that I have like the bow speed up. I put a little more time in rolling for the bow than I did with the cannon, but I mainly just use it to pick off smaller enemies so I can take on the tougher ones without being annoyed. So that kind of covers the reforging that I do for the weapons. The recent update added the tempering with the Umber sight, which kind of gives it like the Diablo, I believe. I actually haven't used it yet, but from what I read, like Diablo style, where you reforge something and you have like a list of potential effects that you can select from, something like that. So, which is great because I hate spending, an hour in the blacksmith trying to reforge for a particular effect. So yeah, let's move on to the armor. I haven't really finished upgrading all of them to like plus 20 yet, but I got most of the effects that I want on here. The most important thing when it comes to pushing damage on your character is finding a set of gloves with 20 attack that you can inherit. Well, it used to be 20, excuse me, it's different now because you can increase it. Well, at 150, level 150, gloves that have a plus 20 attack on them, when you push it up to 200, it gets up to, like, I don't know, remember, like 23 or something like that. But at full familiarity, they go to 40. And so you want to find 4 of these gloves with that as an inheritable, so that you can give it to your various pieces of armor. Obviously, you don't need it. You don't want it inheritable for your gloves because you'd rather inherit something else. But you can roll it on your gloves, of course. And so you can get up to plus 40. You can get up higher, I think plus 41, if you find 210 level gloves. I wouldn't recommend doing that because it would take forever. But if you really cared about that extra plus 5 damage, you can go for it. If you haven't noticed, as you've been soul matching your gear, the increases in stat points, like for attack, occurs every 10 levels. So, you know, at 150 it's like 20, and then 160 it's 21, something like that. And then it kind of goes up from there. At least that's what I've noticed. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure. But then the other effects that you want to have on here are just going to be, you know, whatever caters to your play style. There are some that I didn't care for, some that are like PvP focused, that I was like, yeah, whatever, I don't care for those. But one of the main things that I wanted to get for like the headpiece was elemental damage reduction. Here I wanted to get the reduced damage from attacks during a critical state, as well as the no guard break. Yeah, for sure. 205. That's awesome. I haven't found any. But yeah, that's where I went with that. I actually rolled this Kingo set with 150 life. It gets up to like 500, but it takes super long to roll, so I haven't bothered with that. Gloves, I feel like you can roll some of the best stuff on your gloves, so really save you know, a lot of, I guess, space for, you know, whatever effects you want to roll on your gloves. So the Timely Guard, which a lot of people may not know, is Timely Guard applies to all weapons. It's not just the. It was primarily used for the sword because it had the backwave technique that was, you know, kind of based on the Timely Guard timing, and there was no reason to use Timely Guard or even think about it when you were using the other weapons. But now when you have this, with this new effect where you can increase your attack or defense or health, I believe, with Timely Guard, it's essentially just blocking within a certain window of an attack, and it will initiate the Timely Guard. I can actually demonstrate it to show you that boost in attack with various weapons like the dual swords, and you'll actually see the attribute, the little symbol for the increased attack. So that's something that I think is important to put on your gloves. Again, depending on what you want. You want defense or health or attack. Definitely put that on there. I inherited running speed on here. I love running speed. It saves me a lot. It lets me run around the stage at a pretty high rate. And it's pretty important for PvP, but I especially like it in PvE as well, just to kind of get myself out of those sticky situations, especially with enemies that have a lot of range. And obviously it lets you recover your ki when you're moving backward. And then I have the attribute to, or the effect to increase the throwing speed of the Harukudama. I like throwing ninjutsu, and having a faster Harukudama was actually pretty fun to use. I've been playing around with that. One of my accessories increases the shuriken speed as well, so both of them are kind of going pretty quick. And then obviously the shortened recovery time when I'm out of ki. I think that's imperative to have at least on one of your pieces of armor. You could either have it in your accessories or, you know, one of the various pieces there. It's pretty important. It's gonna save your ass a lot. Get yourself out of those nasty situations when you're just about to die. Moving on to the legs here. Uh, Obviously the running speed again, and then the everlasting key. I was reading about this on Reddit. People were stacking this to, I guess, get it to somewhat of a near broken status, where they get it so high. I think they ran it on 2 or 3 of their armor pieces, to the point where it's like their key never runs out, even though they're at 0. But I don't know. I've honestly never paid attention, so I haven't noticed if it's working it. But I probably just, if it did work, I probably just assumed that I wasn't out of key yet. But anyway, I rolled that. There was nothing else I really cared to roll. And then the evasion key usage. I think this is pretty important. I like to evade a lot. It's something that I carried over from Dark Souls as well. Just general rolling as opposed to blocking everything, because it tends to consume less key. Yeah, for sure. There are quite a few components, especially when you consider PvP, that are pretty broken. Another reason why I tend to avoid it. But anyway, and then I have life on here. Probably couldn't think of anything else to put on there. A very similar roll for the boots, except I added key instead of life. Just prefer to have a greater key pool to pull from, so that I'm not in that key depletion state. So that's the armor that I'm using. Again, a mixture of the Kingo and Master Swordsman set for a couple of reasons. It's a tri-sword build. I'm using a single sword as well as a dual sword. And I wanted to hit the 30.1 threshold so that I can maximize my equipment weight damage bonus. And I also wanted to increase my damage from behind as well as my final blow damage. So a lot of things that some people may not notice is damage from behind is actually a lot more lenient than you would think. A lot of attacks that attack from the front will actually hit from behind. Things like Sign of the Cross and EI, even though you hit them from the front, it's kind of like an anime style where like you're cutting right through them. So it also actually does some damage from behind. Another reason why I'm doing a lot of damage with my EI or Sign of the Cross. Even positioning yourself for the final blow, I think, helps as well. You'll see me kind of maneuver around the back of my opponent whenever I do that. There are a lot of ways to maneuver yourself to the back of your opponent, and I think that's one of the most important things about Nioh, and one of the things that makes it really cool is, like, it's all about situational awareness and spacing. So putting yourself in the most advantageous position is going to be pretty important, and so it kind of adds an element of tactic to my. Hi, Nico. So yeah, that's another reason why to use that. There are other sets you can use, but in my opinion, just from building this got me the second most damage. I think there was one other set that would have pushed my damage a little further, but it would have limited my options a bit in terms of how I usually play. But this catered to my playstyle the best. So yeah, for sure. I don't mind at all. I'll just kind of be talking about this, and then just address any questions that you guys have. These are just a couple of the accessories. This one came with another shortened recovery time out of key. The only reason why I haven't removed the one from my gloves yet is because I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this particular accessory, even though it's pretty decent. I get to increase the Haruka Dama damage, as well as I get yokai close combat damage, and then the damage reduction as well. But short recovery time out of key does not stack with others. A lot of these that don't have the percentages next to them will not stack. So I'm trying to find another example here. Yeah, the increased attack, timely guard. I don't think you could find it on anything else. But if there was something that was on another piece, I don't believe it would have stacked. It wouldn't give you 2 increases. Same with the speed up for the Harukadama, as well as like the Shuriken. Those are not going to stack. So if you find something that does not have a percentage next to it, it's most likely a static number that's going to affect it, and I wouldn't bother putting multiples on them. So having short recovery time on 5 pieces of armor is not going to, you know, decrease the point that you're in a key depletion state to nothing. Which is a good idea. It definitely keeps people from, you know, abusing that. And then one of the most important pieces of accessory that you can obtain, and finally after, you know, one of the patches you're able to obtain it from Return of the Gourd, is the Yasukani Magatama. I got super lucky with this one. As you can see, it's a level 171. I got it relatively early in Way of the Demon, and I just have not let go of it because I liked it a lot. So I like how they changed it to defense from behind. I didn't notice that. It used to say damage from behind, but on accessories it was always actually defense. But it was a little misconstrued because people thought it actually meant damage. And then obviously there's a change defense spirit, which is on there automatically. But the received elemental attack damage was something I really wanted. And then throwing speed up with the Shuriken was a plus. Sorry, I'm just reading this. I just finished my first run on Nioh. Yeah, the fight with Nobunaga and his wife. I can't remember her name right now, but that was like one of the hardest bosses. The first hardest boss that I fought when I first started playing Nioh was man, I can't remember the names of these bosses. The bat girl, whatever her name is. She was like the first wake-up boss for me. Like, all right, I gotta get good here. But yeah, the Nobunaga and his wife is super difficult. So yeah, that's my equipment. That's what I'm using. Hopefully, this kind of gives you an idea of what you should put on your equipment to push your damage to, you know, the higher levels. And yeah, I mean. Aside from if you have any other equipment or accessory based questions, feel free to ask me. I think I'm going to move into demonstrating some of the techniques that was requested, like the parries and back wave and stuff like that. Let's see. So I'm reading this comment here. So yeah. With that being said, I'd want to like take a look at your gear a little bit further. You posted a little bit on it on one of the YouTube videos, but it's most. I mean, it could be a combination of a lot of things, but for the most part, it just might be that your build is just not at a point where it's efficient. So you're not dealing enough damage, and you're potentially, obviously, taking a lot of damage in return. So we probably have to take a look at that further. But let me think. Yeah, I mean, have you upgraded a lot of your weapons to, you know, whatever the highest point is that you're currently at, you know, plus 10 or 15 or whatever? And then the consideration is how high are your weapons? Are they 150 or are they closer to 200? And then, yeah, I mean, relatively, I did Way of the Strong with a level 120 build. That was because I was under the impression that PvP might have like a level limit, so I stuck at 120. So Way of the Strong you can definitely do at a level 120. You want really good gear to do that, because you're going to be under leveled for most of those fights. But if you're on Way of the Demon, definitely. I stopped at level 150 for a long time. A lot of my videos are at 150, and it was when I started Way of the Demon, I was getting my ass kicked there too, even with a lot of the top end gear that I had pre-patch. So if you're on Way of the Demon, definitely push higher to closer to 200. I'm sitting at 230 right now, I believe. Yeah, 231. So let me see. So let's start off with Tempest or Backwave. This is hands down my favorite defensive technique. The main thing with this is it does two things. It's offense and defense at the same time. If you miss the timing of this attack, which is simply blocking at a time before the attack strikes, you initiate the technique, which is Backwave. And then you press block again to force your opponent to the ground to put them in a state where you can do a final blow. Now, if you miss the timing, all you simply do is block their attack, which is huge. That makes it extremely safe technique to use. It's very fast in terms of when you can use it, and you can do it on reaction for the most part. I've even managed to do it on PvP on reaction a few times, but with latency it's pretty difficult. But in regards to PvE, this is something that I can use relatively easily on reaction, and it's a safe maneuver. Not only that, it also provides a ton of damage potential because I can do a final blow afterwards, so I'm doing a lot of damage. It's generally more beneficial for me to do this technique, Backwave, than it is to do something like Haze, which I'll go over a little further. But anyway, one of the most important things, it's just one of the most important things when it comes to many defensive techniques when carrying or the Backwave is you want to improve your situation. So if we're watching the Marubashi Masters here, they all use different weapons. All the various weapons throughout the techniques got changed. And you want, even though it's not your primary weapon, you want to learn to memorize and be able to recognize all of the skills. So obviously right now, so I would know that he's mid stance for the sword is really easy for me to react, especially with Backwave. Low stance, I don't even have to do. Low stance is generally to actually hit Backwave, or definitely any reaction. So high stance is definitely really easy to easily hit. A lot of players are definitely strong attacks. But anyway, right now I just switched over to low stance. You can see the sword is pointing downward at its side. This is where I did not use a lot of instead focus on your speed. A lot of the low stance attacks have very poor range. Avoid them and just stage yourself just outside of the attack range. So that's what I would do. A lot of the weapons are going to hold the weapon stance. Generally, both control is pointed down. Just go down but yeah, so recognize the stance, figure out, okay, this is a humanoid enemy, this is something I can parry. You can't parry yokai. Definitely. You can't even hit that way from yokai. Except for like the soldier yokai. But humanoid enemies are enemies that you want to be able to observe, watch their stance, watch their fighting style. AI, not including the Revenant, but like the Masters will use techniques. BI or tornado techniques, etc. But Revenants do not use it. So, for Revenants, you can pretty much just memorize their attack strings and just figure out what's missing. So, we'll just wait till actually, this is a good opportunity to show off timing card. their block before attack on now you see the attack up symbol disappear underneath my health. That was that's a demonstration of how that works. But that's how that works when you're outside, when you're using the weapon. And you can see, as long as you block an attack before it comes, you can keep that attack up. Almost the entire time. See, it's really easy to do. It's kind of encourages you to, take a breather and switch to defensive kind of guide yourself, figure out, what your next attack is. So switch back to it. He's back in mid stance. One of the other things that I like to do a lot when I'm countering parries or back way is I watch their attack strings. A lot of people combos, so you can kind of get back there and see where the buttons actually. But I'll just kind of bait a lot of these attacks to figure out his combo. And initiate the parry. It safer, but it also puts me in a position where it's advantageous for me. I know exactly what to do before he comes. It's less anticipatory. Just like component of that. Again, low stance, I tend to not do it. It's like a free throw. Just sort of like to avoid and then save myself out of that. Dual swords here, so he's in mid stance right now. Again, you want to be able to do it, going through Marubashi, masters of Marubashi, so that you can learn different stances, different weapons, different strong attacks that improve your timing for back way. It's super important. That's going to be one of the things that pushes your ability to execute this technique to further levels, because you're going to be able to do it anywhere. So try to so let's see. So the spear is one of those weapons that are really easy to parry and back wave on reaction. It's relatively slow. Same with the axe. Is that better? I'll try talking a little while. Alright, so we have this spear master here. I was able to just see that. The other thing is, for the most part, with haze, you can do the same thing there. So that was the high stance attack. Usually, go too low. The game music, I turned it all the way down. let me know again from this one. There's actually 0 volume. So shouldn't be interfering with the microphone. But if I'm not talking loud enough or maybe punching buttons too loud, let me know. So yeah, with the spear and the axe, you can almost do most of it. Again, I would still just I'll actually, let me turn my microphone volume up here. Where is it? Alright, so I turned it up a bit. Is that better? Or should I turn the volume up a bit more? Really? Oh, okay. I'm not sure how to adjust that. If you know how I should do that, then I'd be happy to do that. I just figured I would turn down the volume in my game, but maybe I can do something in my stats or my system settings. Let's try that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we kind of just covered back wave. I didn't even really go over the timing of it, but essentially the timing for it is it's later than you think, but it's also earlier than you think as well. Like there are many times where I've blocked just before an enemy's attack, and it actually doesn't initiate. So it's a little earlier than that, but you can safely initiate it on reaction, and that's generally when you'll hit it. It's really difficult to I guess tell you when to press block. You just have to get used to it, and that's why I always recommend is playing through various missions such as Marabashi, or even just fighting revenants on the Isle of the Demon to get the timing done down. I think Cage, I can't remember his name, he was on Reddit. He actually put up a video on YouTube where he's fighting Okatsu, I think that was her name, I can't remember. And she does like, her sprint attack, kind of like EI a lot. And so you can just practice against that one technique just to get the initial timing down, and then I would suggest moving forward onto Marabashi or, again, the Revenants, just to learn different weapons and stances. Okay, so as you can see there, you can have the torso kicked in there. So let's focus on the haze now. So using the same techniques that I used before, baiting the attacks and just kind of watching the opponent. The dual swordsman stays in mid stance most of the time. And yeah, this is going to switch to low here. But he's going to switch between the weak and heavy attack, obviously. But you can almost tell, or relatively easily, you can tell when he's doing the strong attack versus the weak one, because the animation is a little slower, but very similar to the weak attack animation. I would recommend parrying or learning to counter the strong attack one first, because it's slower and it's easier to react to. Anyway, so he's in low stance here. I don't want to parry him in mid stance. I'm just going to do damage. For the most part, it's just going to be more trouble than it's worth. There's no reason to take damage here. you'd rather just space yourself out and capitalize with a different. So now we can just switch to a high stance, so we can actually parry something here. Except if it's tornado. Obviously, you don't need to, or you can't parry skills, and that's actually a really good point too. And another reason why I tend to not use the parries, unless I'm being fancy, like in some of my other videos. Yeah, the dual stance, especially with elements, they just rack on the elemental effects super quickly. That's why it's a good reason to just avoid trying to do a counter attack to those. But the attempting a parry when your opponent's doing a skill like tornado, it's going to be bad, because not only are you going to miss the parry, you're going to eat damage. Whereas if you attempted to do a back wave to it, you would just block the tornado, which is why it's so much more beneficial to use something, if you're using katana, to use back wave instead of haze for almost all situations: damage, defense, positioning, everything. But for a lot of the other weapons, most of the parries for the other weapons, aside from the dual swords, they're just not very good. But anyway, let's just kind of take care of this guy, so I can just show you practicing parries. Spear Master or the Axe Master. The other thing is with haze is they nerfed it recently, so it no longer puts him in a state where he is in a key depletion, so that I can combo with him. And that was one of the biggest reasons for using haze, but still, even before then, I didn't use it very often, just because it's still risky. Parries are always risky in these types of games. You just have to learn to position yourself. Yeah, it was definitely needed. It did a lot of damage. So, as you can see, I've just been kind of parrying without even talking about it. But these weapons are easy to parry to for a reaction-based parry, specifically with the katana or even the dual katana strike parry. Water Shadow for the katana is a little bit faster, maybe like a frame faster than haze, but there's no other reason to use it, because if you're looking for a faster counter, just use back wave. That's a better counter. Oops. But for the most part, again, mid stance and high stance are going to be the ones that you want to focus on when it comes to working on your parry timings. Baiting attacks so that you know the combo that you're trying to counter. You could almost, right there, I knew he was going to do this thrust both times. It's super easy to parry him. I was moving before, I knew he was going to move, but I knew exactly where he was going with it. Sometimes they don't finish their combos, and that will tend to get you in trouble. But, that's generally how I parry when it comes to bosses, especially humanoid bosses, or just in general. The other thing that I wanted to mention with AI is they like to attack before, like, as you're moving up to them. Kind of like common in like fighting games and whatnot. Whenever you're fighting AIs in fighting games, they tend to try to go on the offense before you can go on the offense. So a lot of times when you're moving back and forth like this, if you move in, he's going to initiate that, just like that. So you could almost anticipate that and then just begin a parry. If you see the stance that they're in, you're like, all right, he's probably going to go for mid or strong stance. But whenever he's in high stance, he almost always does the I could almost guarantee it. So I know the timing. Every time he's in high stance, I could almost guarantee a parry. Those are just like the little things that you can take away from fighting a lot of these guys. Some of them are cool. It's just that. So the low stance axe is actually a little faster than I always think, so I always get hit by that. Let's kind of move over to different different weapon parries here. So the dual sword has a bunch as well. But there is absolutely no reason to use anything other than Shrike. Shrike is the fastest. It's almost so fast that you don't even need to see the animation of your opponent before you can do it. So in that regard, it's really good. The window is probably a little shorter, but when it comes to parries, the most important component is the startup, because you're either doing it as an anticipatory attack or on reaction, so you want it to be fast. So having an extended parry window at the end, either through like the various other weapons or through I can't remember, it's the Yagi set, Shinkage style set. It's kind of pointless, you know, to extend that parry window, because you don't want to be in that window anymore. You want to have either parried and moved and finished, or just moved away. So, but anyway, Shrike is hands down the fastest and best parry. I mean, it's going to put them in a final blow state, unlike Haze, and it does a good amount of damage. So, I would, if you're going to use dual swords, use Shrike. No reason not to. Plus, with the dual swords, you do get access to the blocked pokes, which is another thing that I like to do. So, yeah, but when it comes to the timing, again, there it is. I just tried to parry a tornado and just ate a good amount of damage. But when it comes to Shrike, like, you can do it almost on reaction. I've gotten parried a lot in PvP, so a lot of maybe slower. Oh, and there was low stance, so that was just foolish of me to even try to parry him in that stance. Almost always you're gonna take a damage. Definitely not beneficial to try to. Yeah, sorry, I've just been kind of ignoring the chat a little bit, just so I can keep my ideas straight here. But let's see how you can farm Marabashi from Amrita gains. So, oh, no, Amrita first terms. Oh, so I've actually oh yeah, so I've actually never farmed Amrita before. To be perfectly honest, I've never needed to. But unless you're referring to using things like Amrita earned effects, and then just stacking a lot of those on there, and then using that with Marabashi and just beating Marabashi Masters and just continuously dying so that you can pick up your Amrita and move forward like that. If that's what you're referring to, I do that with gear, but I don't know, verify it with me if that's what you're referring to exactly. Because that is something that's doable, but there's probably, using the Kodama Blessing. Okay, yeah, so I guess essentially what Angie is stating, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just kind of stacking the various effects from either weapons or Kodama Blessings to increase the amount of Amrita that you gain, and then just the Marabashi Masters in general give you a good amount of Amrita for defeating them. The good thing is when you the good thing is when you die to any of the Marabashi Masters in this, the restart is so fast, so you can go back in, grab your Amrita almost relatively easily, and just continue farming. And a lot of times when I've been playing Marabashi, I actually intentionally die, just because I don't want to go through the loading screen to go back to the main menu, then go back into the mission, because it's so much faster to just restart. So a lot of times people might even go all the way to Yagyu, the swordsman master, and just die from there just so that they can farm gear. A lot of these masters are going to drop they drop a good amount of Amrita, but they also drop a good amount of smithing techs, you know, and divine gear too. So if you're looking for that, go with that. But yeah, that's what I would do with those. Let's see. Oh, and you want to? I don't have Twirl or the Odachi parry unlocked, but I do have the Kusarigama parry unlocked, so I will do that one. This is actually the Kusarigama that I have that has the inheritable CTA skill. So if either of you need that, let me know. But anyway, so the Kusarigama as well as the spears, Twirl, and I believe the Odachi. I actually haven't used the Odachi, but looking at the video, it looks very similar. It just has, you know, a long startup but an extended parry window. As you can see here, this is the parry for the Kusarigama. The spears is the Twirl. And so for both of these, for the Kusarigama, when the chain is kind of following that sort of parabolic arc there, is when the parry window is active. And even when it's kind of falling, I haven't tested the frames out, so I'm not sure of the exact frames, but that's generally where I've been successful with the parries during that arc. And when it comes to the spear, the twirl, like while the spear is actively twirling, if they're attacking during that time period, then you will get the parry off. But again, for these weapons, and I'm just kind of assuming for the Odachi, I would highly recommend not using these parries. Instead, if there's another skill that you can put in its place, I would, just because it's going to be completely anticipatory. I'm just going to run in here and I'm going to kind of use the techniques that I use with baiting to try to get these parries off, but with the startup frames, you're most likely going to eat damage more often than not, and it's just going to put you in trouble. So, again, a lot of these masters will attack before you get there, so you can kind of run up and parry and get the parry, just like that. So I just totally guessed, just ran up to him as soon as he could attack, and just did that. So it's something that if that's how you want to fight these masters, for sure. That, I mean, it seems like somewhat of a viable strategy, but eventually you're going to guess wrong. And that's the problem with guessing. You're going to just like that. You didn't really punish me for that. So this is actually the exact technique I used to beat the Marabashi master that uses the Kusarigama, because I didn't unlock any skills for it. So that was all I had. So, as you can see, I mean, I don't really have much. I don't really have a Kusarigama that I can use effectively. You know, something that hasn't been reforged or anything like that. So I'm not doing that much damage for my parry. But it just seems like more of a problem than anything. Like I just wouldn't do it. But if that's your playstyle, you know, if that works for you, I say go for it. Yeah, that was the only way. I had to get all those guesses right just to beat whatever his name is with the Kusarigama, because that was the only technique I had. So it took a very long time because a lot of the masters were buffed and they're across the board. So it just took forever for me to do. Ooh, let's see. Let me just grab some water real quick here. Okay, so kind of went over a few of those. Oh, there was a couple other things I want to talk about now, which I hadn't gone over yet. So kind of, again, without a script here, it would have been organized better, but going back to making your build here, there are a couple things that I hadn't gone over, and that was Spirit Guardians, skills, and clans. So let me just go over those real quick. Yeah, same. I bought it on release, and let's just say my girlfriend's pretty sick of watching me play. So yeah, let's go over those. those three things. So obviously, since the recent update, you can put 2 Guardian Spirits on. Uh, One of the best Guardian Spirits for my type of playstyle, if you're not doing like living weapon or anything like that, but if you have an offensive playstyle that uses a decent amount of skills, um, the what was it? Oh yeah, if you're using a build that relies relatively on skills like Sign of the Cross or EI or even Backwave. Backwave is considered a skill. Kata Jishi is going to be your go-to when it comes to Spear Guardians. It's better than Kato because even though Kato gives you a general increase in your skill damage and close combat damage, Kata Jishi's damage that it boosts that it gives you from activating a skill actually far surpasses, maybe not far surpasses, but it surpasses Kato's. So I would recommend, and you could even play with both of them. Try them both out, and level them both up, and give them both a shot. But from my experience, I got greater damage output from while using Karajishi as my main spirit guardian, and it's primarily because of that. Let me actually just where's these real quick. Spirit guardians. Yeah, Karajushi is going to be the main increase to your damage as far as all the Spirit Guardians go. All this Amrita is going to go to waste. Well, now they have those items that you can store the Amrita in, so I'll probably do that. Oh, you got the game 4 days ago. Wow. Yeah, no, you're doing really well. I wouldn't worry about it at all. Let's see. Okay. So, let's go to the shrine here. And change that. Okay. So, the increased attack skill here, this is what I'm talking about. It temporarily increases attack when you cause damage with a skill. That's going to be the main source of damage that you'll see from my, not the main source, but a good amount. And so this is generally going to out damage most of the other Spirit Guardians when it comes to just pure melee from skills and whatnot. So, excuse me just a second here. So the other perks to it would be the guard key reduction, especially if you're focusing on a katana build. The guard key reduction is going to be pretty important. It's going to save your ass a lot, and it's going to help with key management. So that's going to be something that you want to shoot for if you're min-maxing for your Spirit Guardian. I also wanted the key, so I went as high as the key, which was level 18. Again, as you can see, I stopped before the amount of spirit required for skill life drain because I don't care for that. If you do, go to 21, but otherwise I stopped at 18 for the extra key. Again, having more key in your pool is going to help with overall management. And the secondary Guardian Spirit is totally up to you. I went with the Beast of the Centipede. Mainly because by combining the Karajishi with the Earth-based, Earth-based Spirit Guardians, it's going to give you the elemental damage reduction while guarding again. So I have 2 of them that stack to about whatever it is, like 45% or something like that, which is good. It's really good for PvP, but I don't really use it for that very much. So. But the other thing is you get the half of the effect that they give you, one effect. And for Beast of Centipede, it's the Pierce Guard. Again, as you can see, this was kind of chosen so that I can dabble a little bit in PvP. I plan to give it more, I guess, attempts later on as they continue to patch it more. But at the moment, I'm not a fan of how it's working, so that's why I just kind of have that sitting there. But there are a bunch of others that you can kind of go through and just see like what they're going to give you as a secondary effect, and what it's going to give you when you combine it with the various elements. So the extend element effect is another good one if you like to use like adding water damage and stuff like that. Let's see. There, as you can, yeah, another one with earth. So if you prefer life as opposed to the pierce guard, you can go with Fuzushi. Probably butchering all these names. Critical attack builds. This is something that you can consider as well. So a lot of these damage from behind here as well. It's just totally what works for you, what caters to your playstyle, whether you want to focus on PvP or PvE. But that's what I would do. As you can see, this is where all my Umrita went. I just leveled up all the Guardians. So, but that's as far in regards to Spirit Guardians, what needs to be said about those. The other component, let's just quickly talk about clans. The clan that the clan that I'm currently using is, can't remember the name. What was the name of the clan I'm using? I think it was, it's the one that increases skill damage. I don't even remember the name of it. Where is it? No, that's enemy blindness. I'll find it. But this is also going to depend on what you're using. I would, obviously, if you're using the red demon set, use like Lee. Or it's not Lee, is it? It's actually E. Sorry, I think it's 2 I's. But if you're using, so if you tend to use more skill-based attacks, then I would use the same clan that I'm using, which I'm trying to find right now. I don't remember what it is. And they also added a few new ones on here. I haven't even looked through them. A couple of them, actually. Ranged attacks, heavy armor, etc. Just whatever depends. It depends on whatever playstyle you're going for. That's what I would go for. But the longer you stay in a clan, the more the bonus it's going to give you. So they also added these rewards to it as well. So I guess that's going to be a consideration for it. So yeah, take all of those and do with it what you will. So, on top of that, let's talk a little bit about the skills that you're going to go over. There are the active skills that you're going to use for your weapons, and then the passive skills that you're going to use for your weapons. The active skills are obviously going to be based on the weapons that you're currently using. So obviously for me it's going to be the sword and the dual swords, and I don't bother unlocking skills that I don't care for. So it just saves me the skill points, so that I would rather use on passives or even this newer melee mastery that they recently put up with the patch. So as you can see, I've unlocked most of these here. There are a few that I don't care for, so I don't use. It's gonna reset everything. The titles will not be reset though. That requires a different book to reset. Let's see. So yeah, so with both of these, unlock all the skills that you like to use, which means when you're playing your build, play around with various skills to figure out what suits you best for which button combinations, and then run with those. I wouldn't bother with the other ones, but if you want to, feel free. The other thing that some people don't know is a lot of the passives from the other weapons, such as when you're looking at Spear, Cornered Tiger, this will actually apply to your build. You don't need a spear to use this passive. It will just apply to your build regardless. So there are a few passive skills that I like to use with my build, and that's the Cornered Tiger. That increases close combat damage when your health drops. Let's see. The axe has a... where is it? This one, which is the damage you receive is reduced by 5% when your health is low. And the Kusutagama has a lot dealing with final blows here, the attack from behind, and close combat damage when your health is at max. Those are 3 passives that I would shoot for with the Kusutagama. Odachi, I didn't see anything that I cared for. Dual Swords has a couple as well. Close combat damage against enemies with full life gauges, and key recovery speed while guarding. And finally, the sword has the key recovery speed when your health drops, general key, and that's it for that one. After all of that, if you still have more skill points that you want to spend, I would spend it on one of these mastery skill points, so either melee or ranged or barehanded, depending on what you use. So I obviously went all into melee mastery with the rest of mine. I just have one left. So, but again, the skills, the stats that increase your skill points are going to be skill and strength, and then every other stat for stamina, body, and heart, I believe it is. Let's see. Then there's obviously ninjutsu and omio, totally based on what you prefer to use. I had a bunch. I don't really use a lot of omio, so I just almost put all of it to the passive defensive techniques that they have here, like against fire, lightning, wind. The best build for lower levels? That's a good question. I guess it really depends what requires the smallest investment for stats and also gives you the highest damage output. I think to be honest, I think dual swords is super easy to use. You get a ton of damage off of dual swords, and you're investing into skill, which is great because it's going to give you the extra skill points that you need to unlock the various skills, and it also gives you enough for key pulse. The other one, katana, is also pretty solid, just because you're investing into heart, which is going to give you a really good key pool, so you can spend a lot of time on the defensive as you're learning, the game, which I think is one of the important things when you're learning the game. Is you tend to be more defensive and maybe a little timid to go on the offensive, so that would help there. I know that there are various builds, like with the Kusutagama, you can use blade spin, which is obviously has been nerfed like twice already, but it's really strong. It's still strong, it just consumes a lot of ki, and I've seen people just run through the game with that. And then finally living weapon builds, but those usually require decent investment in a lot of things, so I don't think that would be good for a low level, but I could be wrong. Let's see. Oh yeah, so again, omio and ninjutsu, whatever caters to your playstyle. I use the water talismans that I've mentioned here, that I think that these are better than just having inherent element on your weapon. The other thing to note with these, especially for new players, Nico, I don't know if you know this, but for these have various tiers, which have differing jutsu costs for each one, and this basically allows you to ready multiple forms of that jutsu so that you have more available to you. So it starts with 7 shuriken. If you put 2 of them on, it's going to go up to 14. So if I can try and show you how I have mine set up. So yeah, as you can see, I unlocked all 3 tiers of the shuriken, but I only equipped 2 of them, which is the latter 2 of the tier. By equipping 2 of them, it increased the amount that I have to 14. So it just kind of doubles it. But it also shows you how much you have available in PvP, and that's the 2 cross swords there. So 4 of them are available in PvP. For newer players, something that I used, admittedly, quite a bit was the quick change scroll, I believe it's called. and that one basically allowed you to cheat death. Yeah, right here. So basically, once you die, you reappear right above where you died. And you can kind of do a little plunging attack too at the same time. Sorry, that's my cat brushing up against the microphone. Anyway, and you can equip multiple quick change scrolls as well, so that you have several options or several times that you can cheat death. But it's only available for a certain duration, so I wouldn't just like start the mission and use it and then just think you can run through the whole mission without dying. So that covers the skills that I use and what I would recommend that other players use, beginners, or if you're getting more advanced, figure out what ninjutsu or omio that you tend to like, and then just stick with that. That's kind of what I do. I don't use it too much. I usually use the ninjutsu just to kind of get the attention of random enemies, like kind of like stones or whatnot. So that's what I. But I just like to play around with all of them. I think that covers just about everything when it comes to builds here. Do either of you have any questions? Hang on, I'm just moving my microphone right now. That was a pretty long video, but I think I covered just about everything. I mean, if I missed something, or if there's something specific that you wanted me to go over or try to demonstrate, I'd be happy to do that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I used it almost exclusively for like a few months because my build took a long time just with work and everything. Cool, awesome. Well, perfect. Yeah, for sure. Give it, practice it. Definitely practice it in Marabashi with the different masters. For sure, we're all famous. So it's been about an hour and a half, so I'm gonna cut the stream now, but I'm gonna put this up on YouTube anyway, of course, it's streaming right to it, and just so people can kind of go back and look through it if there's any sort of information. I'll try to edit it with timestamps if I can, just so people can skip through it. So yeah, no, thank you guys for coming, appreciate it. See ya.